if someone is health minded, wants to have, steady energy and steady blood sugar throughout the day without sort of the peaks and crashes that we were talking about, they want to make sure that they're not having big swings in their insulin levels that come from those glucose spikes, which, as we know, can cause anything from brain fog to poor sleep, fatigue, and long term even conditions like Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease. But should we be cutting out carbs altogether is my main question for this part of the conversation. But before that, I actually wanted you to clarify a point that, when we talk about our blood sugar going up to an unhealthy range, many of us, might be pre-diabetic and not even know it. But that doesn't just mean avoiding sugar, right? It means avoiding refined carbs and starches as well. When we're talking about blood sugar, it doesn't mean that it's going up just because we're eating sugar, right?
True. That's a myth, Daphne. Very often I meet people that say, "Oh, I've cut back, or I'm avoiding carbohydrates," and what I find them doing is actually either avoiding just sugar, or they're avoiding starch, which is a type of carbohydrate, and then keeping natural sugars in their diet. So we need to clarify here before we talk about how we choose to build in carbohydrates in our day, that under the umbrella, under the title of carbohydrates, we have starch and we have simple sugars. Some of the simple sugars are the fructose that I mentioned before from our fruits. It's lactose, the one coming in our milk and dairy products. But simple sugars are also our honey, the sugar, the table sugar, as we call it, that we add to our coffee or tea. Any syrup that can be used for extra taste or in our cooking. So we have our simple sugars, but we also have starch coming from all sorts of sources. Our cereals, our rice, pasta, potatoes, starchy vegetables like peas and sweet corn. Um, Sources of starch are pulses like lentils, peas, black eyed peas, that kind of stuff. Starch is also coming from any sorts of breakfast cereals, anything, any type of breakfast cereal is a source of starch, so a source of carbohydrate. Am I forgetting something here? Flour, anything made with flour is a source of carbohydrate in the starch type. So it doesn't mean that.
Are there good types of flour and bad types of flour? Because I know a lot of people try to use, let's say corn flour or sort of gluten-free or I don't know, different types. Is there a difference or is it at the end of the day? I mean, maybe people react differently, but
Yes. Now, I'll come to that. When we talk about the good carbs, it depends on the effect of that of the effect of that carbohydrate having on your individual blood sugar levels. So, a good carbohydrate is a carbohydrate that keeps your energy, thus your blood sugar levels more stable for about 3 to 3.5 hours, and it gives you a very slow peak. It will increase your blood sugar levels because that's what carbohydrate wants to do. It will increase your blood sugar levels, but will increase it more slowly, and you will see a slight peak within the first hour to 90 minutes maximum after the ingestion of a good carbohydrate, and that curve will slow down and return to your initial close to your initial blood sugar levels in the next 3 to 3.5 hours. That is a good picture uh, given by a good source of carbohydrate if you can monitor that blood sugar fluctuation using a continuous glucose monitoring system. um, so that's a good carbohydrate. We need carbohydrate.
sorry, yeah, please continue. I mean, I wanna know, like, firstly, as you said, we can't cut out carbohydrates completely. So tell us about the importance of carbohydrates. And but also, if we are going to be eating, a one-off something, we are going to, at the end of the day, we're not going to cut out pasta forever. We are going to have a pizza occasionally. Are there any strategies that we can do to sort of mitigate, let's say, some of the adverse effects?
Sure. So we can cut back on carbohydrates, but we need to spread them evenly during the day and make sure we have, I would say, an sort of stable amount of carbohydrate between day to day at each meal time. Our metabolism, our bodies like that. They like consistency. They like knowing what to expect. So I would say keep a steady amount of carbohydrate, a low amount of carbohydrate for your breakfast, then spread your carbs starting, with the load depends on their individual and what the reaction they get from carbs. But I would say start with 30 grams of carbohydrates for the main meals if you want to keep your carbohydrates low at low levels, low consumption during the day, and then repeat that for a few days to be able to monitor your blood sugar response to that sort of meal organization. You can't cut back or altogether in carbs because carbohydrate is the main fuel for our brain function, and we need to be able to think straight during the day. So there is.
That's 'cause they basically break the food, the carbs are broken down into glucose, right? And glucose is the main energy source of the brain.
Exactly. No other energy source can bypass the brain membranes. So our brain has a preference for glucose. So we need to maintain a minimum in literature. Um, you get the value of a minimum 120 grams of carbohydrates for needed for brain function, and especially in the developing years. Okay, plenty of people live or organize their diets with less than 120 grams of carbohydrates as a maximum consumption during the day, and they're doing fine. But I would say I wouldn't go from a consumption of over 200 grams of carbohydrates down to 80. It needs to be done gradually and by monitoring your blood sugar response.
What should we be eating our carbs with? What's sort of helpful, let's say, rather than eating them maybe on an empty stomach?
True. Now, you said how you can manipulate our carbohydrates so they can still be part of our diet, either daily or, some treat carbohydrates coming from pizzas, for example, or more rich and more. Heavy meals on carbs. Yes, we can manipulate those meals by adding extra fiber. I very often say if you want to enjoy more carbs or carbs that you'll find they spike your blood sugars, have salad, have your vegetables with them, and start your meal by the fiber so you don't give your carb load to an empty stomach. And we know that if we pair those carbohydrates with extra fiber, the blood sugar curve will be a much slower one, and will definitely avoid the extreme peak in our blood sugar levels. Now, the same we can achieve by pairing our carbohydrates with good fats. We mentioned that for the breakfast options. The same goes for the main meals or for the snacks later in the day, especially the PM, the afternoon snack.
Can you give us some specific examples? Yeah.
Yeah, it could be anything from peanut butter or nuts or tahini or healthy low-fat cheese, for example. You can pair that with a source of carbohydrate, let's say rice cakes, for example. Some there are people out there that think a rice cake, because it's very light in calories, and usually they have a small load of carbohydrates. It's a healthy option in terms of a carbohydrate containing snack. The truth is, it's a high glycemic index snack. So if I still want to have my rice cake as an easy, quick snack, it's better if I have a little bit of cheese with them, or spread a bit of peanut butter or a healthy nut butter over to the snack rice cake, and that will definitely have a better result on blood sugars. The other thing is adding some extra protein. For example, if you want to have a crisp bread, or a Melba toast type of source of carbohydrates, you can have a boiled egg with it, or your cheese again, and then adding the protein next to your carbohydrate. You extending the absorption rate of your carbohydrate, and then you lower the blood glucose peak. The one thing that we didn't mention, and I was thinking about it, is there's lots written about this resistance starch. I will make a quick mention. It's all about food chemistry, but in practical terms, carbohydrates coming from sources like rice, pasta, or potatoes, they behave differently to our blood sugar levels if we first cook them and let them cool down, and then you eat them in a lower sort of temperature or the following day. I can't really explain the mechanism behind it, because it's all, as I said, chemistry, and it will take a long time, but they show a different effect, a better effect.
So you're talking about something different to, let's say, soaking potatoes to remove some of the amylase, or how does it of the starch of them, or is this something different?
It's a different mechanism.
Okay, so you can sort of at least have them at room temperature, not when they're piping hot, let's say. And then you're saying even you could maybe put them in the fridge and have it the next day even or something.
Exactly. It has what happens on a chemical level. It has to do with altering the glycemic index of those foods. So it alters the speed at which they will affect our blood sugars.
So once again, mum's advice of have your food before it gets cold is wrong. But
You can at least start with a salad. And then move on to your carbohydrates at a better temperature.
thanks so much, Eleni. I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add, but that was also fascinating. I will put all your details in the show notes as well, so everyone can find you. And that was really interesting. I'm sure, no doubt, that we'll have you on some of our future discussions again as well.